Yeah, hi Makka. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, all right. I have joined from the different account. Okay. Now I'll present my screen. Please let me know that it is visible to you. That we get further. Please keep your mic off, na Makka. Okay. When needed, I'll ask you to turn on the mic. Okay, fine. Just a second. I'm presenting the screen. Yeah, I hope the presentation is visible now. The PPT is visible. All right. So I think it's been almost 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago we met, right? And last week, like I had booked my slot for vaccination, and I was about to get vaccinated, and then the medical emergency came at our home. So that's why I had to postpone the plan, and we couldn't continue with the classes in the last week as well as yesterday. But finally, yesterday I got vaccinated. I hope all of you also have got vaccinated. सबका हो गया वैक्सीनेशन? किसी कोई बाकी है? You can reply. No? Okay. Get vaccinated as soon as like you get the chance. Okay. You can turn on the mic directly because we only have 4 or 5 students in the classroom, so it won't be a chaos. Okay. So, guys, today our topic is going to be two-port networks. I hope you might have heard about two-port networks, and I think this portion is in your university syllabus as well, right? So these are the parameters that we have to find out when we discuss about two-port networks. So what exactly is two-port network? Two-port network is nothing but a network which is having two ports. That is, first one is input port, second one is output port. Okay, and we have to do some analysis over that network, and we have to find out these few parameters. That is Z parameters, Y parameters, H parameters, and H inverse parameters. After that, we have transmission parameters and inverse transmission parameters. So one by one, we'll see how we calculate all these parameters. Okay. So first of all, we have is Z parameters. So for Z parameters, let me just draw one circuit. That is, let this be any circuit. Okay. This is a circuit, and this is our output port. This is our input port. At input port, we have plus minus, that is V1, and at output we have V2 plus minus, and we are considering that I2 current is flowing from input to from output to input, and there is again one current, that is I1. Okay, so based on these what we can say parameters, we have to calculate certain things. Now first of all, Z parameters are also called as mm, impedance parameters. Okay, impedance means nothing but it is synonym to resistance. But when we talk about resistance, it only consists of like resistances only. But when we talk about impedance, then impedance means resistance or the overall resistance provided by the all the elements, like it may be capacitor, inductor, and resistor all together. So we'll call it as a impedance parameters. Z parameters are also called as impedance parameters. So as I said, like impedance is a synonym for resistance. So what will be the like basic structure for Z parameters? It will be V by I. What it will be? V by I. V by I means nothing but a resistance, or we can say an impedance. Okay, so if we have to write the formula for Z parameters, so it can be written as V1 is equals to Z11 I1 plus Z12 I2, and V2 will be equal to Z21 I1 plus Z22 I2. Okay, so see, V1 V2 in Z parameters, like our left hand side of the equation will be V1 V2. So for similarly, now if we want to compare these parameters, like it will be V1 V2 for Z parameters, I1 I2 for Y parameters, V1 I2 for H parameters, that is hybrid parameters. Again it will be I1 V2 for H inverse parameters, and for transmission parameters we will be having V1 I1, and for inverse transmission parameters we will be having V2 I2. So these are the left hand sides of the equation. Right hand sides will change accordingly. Okay, so this is just a trick I am telling you to remember. V1 V2 I1 I2, V1 I2 I1 V2, V1 I1 V2 I2. This is how we remember. Now this is the basic, these two are basic formulas for Z parameters. And like if we want to calculate any parameters, first of all we have to calculate Z parameters. So these are very important parameters. Okay, now what is Z11? What does it stand for? Okay, like if I write Z11, so as I told you, it is going to be V by I only. Okay, Z means V by I, but as it is 1 1, then it will be called as V1 by I1. So in this case, I2 will be equal to 0. Okay, Z11 is equals to V1 by I1, and we consider I2 as 0. Now, if we want to calculate Z12, so it will be V1 by I2, and in this case, what we will consider, I1 is equals to 0. Now consider these two elements, or what we can say, these two, let me just find, yeah, variable, these two variables v1 and v2, these are dependent variables. Okay, v1 and v2 are dependent variables, whereas I1 and I2 are independent variables. I1 and I2 are completely independent variables. V1 and V2 are why dependent variables? Because value of V1 is dependent on I1 and I2. As I1 and I2 changes, V1 also changes. But I1 and I2 are not dependent on anyone, so these are called as independent variables. So just remember the term, that the terms which are in right side of the equation, those are independent terms, and the terms which are on the left side of equation, these are dependent terms for all the parameters, not for only Z parameters. So if I want to calculate Z21, so it will be V by I again, but see, 2 is first here, so V2 by I1. Here I2 will be equal to 0. Z22 will be equal to V2 by I2, and I1 will be equal to 0. So this is some briefing about Z parameters. Now how do we apply this? ठीक है, हमने इतना सारा तो देख लिया, लेकिन इसको अप्लाई कैसे करना है? So for that, what we'll do, we'll take one example. Okay, let me just find a proper example for this so that we can proceed. Okay, yeah, let us suppose I have a circuit here. This is one resistance, this is another resistance, this is one more resistance, and this is the ground level. So this is V1, this, let us suppose this is 2 ohm, this is 3 ohm, and this is 1 ohm. This is I1, this is I2, and this is V2. Okay, so for this circuit we have to calculate Z parameters. So how do we calculate it? Okay, now see, this I1 current is coming from this side, I2 current is coming from this side, so total current flowing through this branch will be I1 plus I2. All right, now voltage across this resistance, it will be 2I1, isn't it? Plus, जहां से करंट एंटर हुई वहां पे प्लस, और जहां से करंट एग्जिट हुई, दैट इज नेगेटिव, माइनस. So 2I1 will be voltage across this resistance, isn't it? Now plus minus 3I2 will be voltage across this resistor. And here we will be having I1 plus I2 as a voltage. Like 1 ohm resistance is there, so this will be the voltage I1 plus I2. Now if we apply KVL here in this loop, so I'm starting from here, so it will be minus V1 plus 2I1 plus I1 plus I2 is equals to 0. So V1 will be equal to 3I1 plus I2. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. So this is our first equation. Okay. I hope I'm not wrong. Okay. Now, if we compare this equation with this one, V1 is equals to Z11 I1 plus Z12 I2. If we compare these two equations, so our Z11 will be equal to Z11 will be equal to 3 and Z12 will be equal to 1 only. Isn't it? Understood? Any doubt? Any doubt? I have to stop and ask. No.
No, sir.
All right. Everyone, guys, please response. Give me response. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, fine. Now, so we have found out Z11 and Z12. Now we need to find out Z21 and Z22. How do we find out? We'll apply KVL in this loop. So again, it will be, I'm writing it here only. Okay. I'm starting from here, minus V2 plus 3I2 plus I1 plus I2 is equals to 0. Now it will be V2 is equals to I1 plus 4I2. So that we can say Z21 is equals to 1 and Z22 is equals to 4. So this is how we calculate Z parameters. Okay. Now this was very simple example, but you might get complicated examples. Okay. And like complicated means how complicated? Uh, the examples might contain dependent sources, or even they might contain inductors, capacitors. Okay, circuit can be anything, but concept will be this only. We just have to follow this process only. Okay, so this is how we calculate Z parameters. Now remember one thing: to calculate any other parameter, first step we have to do is we have to calculate Z parameters. Okay, now next one we have is Y parameters. As I already told you, for Z parameters our initials were V1 and V2. Now here we have I1 and I2. Okay, so I1 is equals to what? I1 is equals to Y11 V1 plus Y12 V2 is equals to Y21 V1 plus Y22 V2. Now, Y parameters are also called as admittance parameters. Okay, or we can say um, the reverse conductance parameters, opposite of resistance. So here the basic structure of these parameters, Y parameters, will be like I by V. ओके, Z पैरामीटर्स में कैसा था? V by I था, लेकिन Y पैरामीटर्स में अभी कैसा रहेगा? I by V रहेगा. One more thing I forgot to tell you in these parameters, in Z parameters or in any other parameters. One thing you have to remember is like, now we had V1 and V2 as dependent variables, right? Dependent variables. And I1 and I2 were our independent variables. All right. So let us suppose there exists a relation between I1 and I2. there exists a relation between I1 and I2. Let us suppose we are solving the equation and we are finding the value like I1 is equals to, just a second, I1 is equals to 2I2. That means these two are dependent. As I1 changes, I2 also changes, or I2 changes, I1 also changes. That means they are now being dependent on each other. But that should not happen. If this happens, we cannot calculate any parameter, like neither z parameter nor any parameter. हम कोई भी parameter calculate नहीं कर सकते. So what is the basic condition? डिपेंडेंट वेरिएबल्स के बारे में हमें इतना केयर करने की जरूरत नहीं है, लेकिन इंडिपेंडेंट वेरिएबल्स में अगर कोई रिलेशन एग्जिस्ट करता है, सो in that case we cannot calculate the parameters, any parameters, not only z parameters. Okay, so अभी बाकी के parameters के लिए dependent और independent variables change होंगे. Like for example y parameters की बात ले लो, अभी यहाँ पे I1 and I2, these are dependent, isn't it? And V1 and V2 are independent. तो अभी y parameters में V1 और V2 में कोई भी relation हमें नहीं मिलना चाहिए. अगर ऐसा होता है, so in that case we can say we cannot calculate y parameters. Okay, independent variables में there should not be any relation. Now y11 is equals to what? Y11 is equals to, our basic format is I by V, but it is y11, so I1 by V1. So in this case V2 will be equal to 0, y12 is equals to I1 by V2, and V1 is equals to 0. All right, y21 is equals to I2 by V1, V2 is equals to 0, and y22 is equals to I2 by V2, and V1 is equals to 0. So this is how we define the parameters. Okay, now how do we calculate these parameters? So again, we'll take the same example. Okay, so let us suppose this is the example that I have already taken in the last parameter. Okay, so these are two resistances. This is third one, its value is 2 ohm, its value is 3 ohm, and this value is 1 ohm. I1 is flowing through here, I2 is flowing through here, and this is V1, this is V2. So what were the equations? Equations were V1 is equals to 3I1 plus I2, and V2 is equals to I1 plus 4I2. These are the equations for Z parameters that we have already found, like see V1 and V2. You can verify this. So this is the equation for V1, 3I1 plus I2, and this is the equation for V2, that is I1 plus 4I2. So we have to modify these two equations. Now how do we modify this? Okay, now let us suppose we'll compare these two equations with these two equations. So let me just write down the equations for y parameters. What are the equations? I1 is equals to y11 v1 plus y12 v2, and I2 is equals to y21 v1 plus y22 v2. So these are equations for y parameters. Now to get the first equation, we need I1, we need V2, we need V1, we need V2. ठीक है, तो हमें eliminate क्या करना है? We have to eliminate I2, isn't it? I2 हमें eliminate करना पड़ेगा. So how do we eliminate I2? See, अगर मैं फर्स्ट एग्जाम्पल को या फिर फर्स्ट इक्वेशन को 4 से मल्टीप्लाई करता हूं, सो इट विल बी 4v1 इज इक्वल्स टू 3 4 जार 12i1 प्लस 4i2. मैंने क्या किया, इस इक्वेशन को 4 से मल्टीप्लाई किया थ्रू आउट, सो इससे कोई डिफरेंस इस इक्वेशन में आने वाला तो है नहीं. सो दिस इज माई न्यू इक्वेशन. नाउ व्हाट आई विल डू, आई विल subtract this v2 or this equation. Let us suppose this is the first equation, this is second equation, okay, and this is third one. So what I will do, I will subtract second equation from the third one. So v2 is equals to I1 plus 4i2, and we are going to subtract this, so this gets cancelled, Now 4v1 minus v2 is equals to 11i1, isn't it? This is the equation. So if we modify this equation, it will be i1 is equals to 4 by 11 v1 minus 1 by 11 v2. So this equation is in the form of this, isn't it? I1 is equals to I11 v1 plus y12 v2. So from this equation we can conclude that y11 is equals to 4 by 11 and y12 is equals to minus 1 by 11. So this is how we have found out y11 and y12. I hope this is clear. All right. Now, what is the next step? What we have to find out now? We have to find out y21 and y22. So this equation is required, right? So I2 is required, V1 is required, and V2 is required. So what we want to eliminate, we have to eliminate I1. Got this? We have to eliminate I1. How can we eliminate I1? If we multiply this equation 2 by 3, इस इक्वेशन 2 को हम थ्रू आउट 3 से मल्टीप्लाई करेंगे एंड वी विल सब्ट्रैक्ट दिस इक्वेशन 2 फ्रॉम द ओरिजिनल फर्स्ट इक्वेशन. ठीक है. सो मैं पहला इक्वेशन जो है वो एज इट इज लिख देता हूं यहाँ पे. v1 is equals to 3i1 plus i2. This is our original first equation. Now second equation which we are going to modify, we are going to multiply this equation throughout by 3. All right. So 3v2 is equals to 3i1 plus 12i2. Isn't it right? See. Okay. So this is our modified equation and I'll give this as equation 4. So subtract, sign changes happen. So 3i1 gets cancelled. So v1 minus 3v2 is equals to minus 11i2. All right. So I2 will be equal to 1 by minus 1 by 11 plus 3 by 11 v2. Right. I'm transferring this minus 11 to the left side. Okay. So what will be y21? Y21 will be minus 1 by 11 and y22 will be equal to 3 by 11, right? So this is how we calculate y parameters. I hope it is clear. Now next one we have is z parameters. Again, the condition is same. Like I told you, na, independent variables, there should not be any relations. So same condition applies for this example also. So the next parameters we have is h parameters. So now what I will do, I will give you the format of h parameters and I will ask you to calculate the parameters. You try and calculate the parameters. Okay. So as I told you already, for z parameters, we had v1, v2. For y parameters, we had i1, i2. Now for h parameters, we have v1, i1, v1, i2. Okay, this is the format. Z, y, and this is h. Now v1 is equals to h11 i1 plus h12 v2 and I2 will be equal to h21 I1 plus h22 v2. So this is these are the formulas for h parameter. Okay. Now I will give you one circuit and try finding the h parameters. So let us suppose this is one resistance. This is again another resistance. This is 1 ohm. This is 3 ohm. And we have one dependent voltage source also here. Okay, it is a dependent voltage source. It depends on I1, 2 I1. Again, I have a resistance here also. Okay, and this is the ground. So value of this resistance is 2 ohm. This is I1. This is I2 plus or minus V2 plus and minus V1. So this is the circuit. And these are the two formula that you have to find out by applying KVL, KCL. So give it a try. Give it a try for 1 or 2 minutes, then we'll discuss it. Okay. First, first thing I want you people to find out is Z parameters only. Okay. First आप क्या करिए, Z parameters निकालिए, उसके बाद से मैं कैरी फॉरवर्ड करूंगा. ओके. ट्राई एंड फाइंड आउट Z parameters, which is very very important. कोई भी पैरामीटर आपको निकालना है तो Z parameters is the first step. I hope everyone is giving a try. जो कुछ डिस्कस किया अभी तक उसमें कोई प्रॉब्लम है तो यू कैन टॉक विथ मी. And don't worry guys, like these are easy examples, but in the next class we are going to take the advanced level examples as well. Okay. बिकॉज गेट एग्जाम में एक क्वेश्चन तो आता ही है इस टॉपिक पे, जेड पैरामीटर, सॉरी, टू पोर्ट नेटवर्क्स पे. रमन, डू यू वांट टू स्पीक समथिंग?
I got jet parameters, sir.
ओके, टाइप इट इन द चैट बॉक्स नो. Z11, Z12, Z21, Z22. Guys, don't bother about that dependent voltage source. It is very easy. 2 4, sorry, 5 2 4 5. Okay. Anyone? Okay. Okay, all right. Raman and Makka. Shardul, Shubham, Aditya, any difficulty? Can you find it or not? Remaining three, Shubham, Shardul, Aditya. Okay, yeah, same. All right. So shall I continue from Z parameters or shall I repeat Z parameters? How to calculate Z parameters? या फिर Z parameters से आगे के मैं मतलब आगे से explain करूँ? Do I need to explain how to calculate Z parameters again? I hope no. मतलब मक्का, रमन, yeah, ठीक है. चलो. So as you guys have found out, so sorry. As तुम लोगों ने जैसे लिखा कि Z11 is equals to है 5, Z12 is equals to है 2, Z21 is equals to है 4 एंड Z22 है is equals to 5, राइट. सो इससे मैं इक्वेशन बना सकता हूँ. कैसे इक्वेशन बना सकता हूँ? V1 is equals to 5I1 plus 2I2 and V2 is equals to 4I1 plus 5I2. So this is my first equation, this is my second equation. Okay, so इस तरीके से मैंने इक्वेशन बना लिया. Now what I need first equation. V1 is equals to H11 I1 plus H12 V2. So इसमें मुझे क्या eliminate करना है? What I need to eliminate from these two equations? Can anybody? What I need to eliminate? देखो ना, कंपेयर करो पहला जो हमारा इक्वेशन है H पैरामीटर्स का, उस इक्वेशन के साथ इन दोनों इक्वेशन को कंपेयर करो एंड टेल मी व्हाट I2. I need to eliminate I2. क्लियर? सो I2 कैसे एलिमिनेट करेंगे अभी हम? I2 एलिमिनेट करने के लिए सिंपली वी कैन मल्टीप्लाई दिस इक्वेशन बाय 5, multiply this equation by 5, multiply this equation by 2, and just perform the subtraction, and we're done, right? So how do we do that? See, 5I1 is equals to 5 5s are 25. Sorry, it should be 5V1. 5V1 is equals to 25I1 plus 10I2 This is my third equation. Now I multiplied this equation by 5. I'll multiply this equation by 2. So 2v2 is equals to 8i1 plus 10i2. This is my fourth equation. I'll simply subtract them. Sign change. 10i2 10i2 gets cancelled. 25i1 minus 8i1, that is equals to 17i1, I guess. Is it? And it will be 5v1 minus 2v2. Now it is almost in the structure, isn't it? Like we just have to shift this 17. So it will be I1 is equals to 5 by 17 V1 minus 2 by 17 V2. So H11 is equal to 5 by 17. H12 is equals to minus 2 by 17. Okay. So these are the H11 and H12. Now we need to find out our this equation. Which equation? This equation. So guys, if we compare,
No, sir.
sorry,
Please check once, sir.
uh, which one?
It's first equation. It should be v1 equal to h11 I1 plus h12 v2, right? But you have taken I1 equal to.
Sorry, this equation, no?
Yes, sir. These are not h11 and h12, sir.
Yeah, correct. Sorry, my bad. Okay, yeah, just a second. So these are wrong. Thank you, Makka. Okay, so it should be 5 V1 is equals to 17 I1 plus 2 V2. Now I hope I'm correct, right? Is it, Makka?
Yes, sir.
V1 is equals to 17 by 5 I1 plus 2 by 5 I2. Thank you. Okay,
V2,
H.
sir.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's V2. Yeah. So H11 is equals to 17 by 5 and H12 is equals to 2 by 5. Right. Okay. Thank you, Makka. You can turn off your mic, please. All right. So now next we have to find out H21 and H22. So we need to like modify our equations in this form. Okay. I2 is equals to H21 I1 plus H22 V2. So how can we modify these equations? Like see, these are our basic equations of Z parameters. So if we modify second equation only, okay, we don't need to modify both the equations, or we don't need to use both the equations, isn't it? We don't need I2 here, isn't it? And we don't have, sorry, just a second. Yeah, we don't need V1 and we don't have V1 here also, right? So we just have to modify this equation in a way it should be I1 is equals to something, is it? Sorry, I2 is equals to something. Okay, so I will write this equation, that is V2 is equals to, we have 4i1 plus 5i2, and we have to modify this equation in the form of I2. So 5i2 is equals to V2 minus 4i1, or it should be like this. Just a second. 5i2 is equals to minus 4i1 plus V2, right? I2 is equals to minus 4 by 5 I1 plus 1 by 5 V2. So here we have H21 is equals to minus 4 by 5 and H22 is equals to 1 by 5. Okay. So I hope this is correct. Is it? Any any mistakes that I have done? Or is it correct? I hope it is correct. Okay. So which are the dependent and independent variables here? Which are dependent? Which are dependent one in H parameters? Dependent variables are V1
I2.
and I2. All right. And independent variables are I1 and V2. Right. I1 and V2. All right. Now next we have is H inverse parameters. Okay, so यहाँ पे कीबोर्ड से टाइप नहीं हो पाता है, इसके लिए मैंने ऐसा इसे डिनोट किया है, बट एक्चुअली इट शुड बी like this: H inverse. Okay, H inverse parameters. So H inverse parameters कैसे होंगे? H inverse parameters will be I1 and V2 इस फॉर्म में होंगे, ठीक है? So H11 dash V1 plus H12 dash I2 is equals to H21 dash V1 plus H22 dash I2. So this is the structure of H inverse parameters. Okay, now let us suppose we have one circuit. This is one resistance. We have another resistance here. Then we have a dependent voltage source here. Then we have another dependent current source here. This is current source. This is voltage source. And we have another branch here. Okay, so this is 2 ohm. This is again 2 ohm. This is 1 ohm. This is 2 I1, value of this dependent current source, and this is 2V1. So this is V1 and this is V2. So try and find out Z parameters first. Okay, first of all find out Z parameters, then we can proceed with the H inverse parameters. Okay, now everyone please try. I I expect answers from Shubham, Shardul and Aditya. First step is we have to find out Z parameters. And don't bother about this current source. I1 is here, I2 is here, which is very, very important. All right. Can you find the Z parameters? ओके, सो जब तक तुम लोग Z पैरामीटर्स निकाल रहे हो, मैं यहाँ पे सॉल्व करता हूँ. ओके, सो voltage across this will be I1. All right, voltage across this will be, now see, 2 I1 is coming from this branch, 1 I1 is coming from this branch, so it will be 3 I1 here. So 3 into 2 is 6 I1 voltage across this resistance. Now 3 I1 is coming from here and I2 is coming from here, so the current through this branch will be 3 I1 plus I2, and voltage across this branch will be, or this resistance will be, 6 I1 plus 2 I2. This is the voltage. Okay, now ignore this current source and apply the KVL in this loop. Okay, apply the KVL in this loop. You will get V1, the equation for V1, and when you apply KVL here, you will get the equation for V2. Now we'll apply it. Okay, how do we apply it? Let's proceed. Start from here. It is minus V1 plus we go here, that is I1, plus then we move forward. This is 6 I1. This is 6 I1 plus again 2 V1 Now plus we have 6i1 plus 2i2 is equals to 0, right? This is how we have applied the KVL. I1 plus 6i1 plus 2v1 plus 6i1 plus 2i2. So this is the KVL in the first loop. I hope you all are trying, is it? जो लोग try कर रहे हो try करो. Now this is v1, this is 2v1, so it will be only v1 I1 plus 6i1, that is I1 plus 6i1 plus 6i1, 6 plus 6 is 13, 13, sorry, 6 plus 6 is 12, 12 plus 1 is 13, so 13 I1 and plus 2 I2 is equals to 0. Okay, now if we simplify this, it will be v1 is equals to minus 13 I1 minus 2 I2. So this is our first equation for z parameters, is it? Now our z11 is minus 13, z12 is minus 2. I hope it is correct. Everyone is getting it. Okay, now we have to find out the equation for v2. So apply the KVL directly here. So it will be like, see, this is v2 and this is the voltage. So whatever will be the voltage across this branch, that will be nothing but v2. So v2 is simply what? v2 is equals to 6i1 plus 2i2. No need to calculate much, isn't it? See, these two terminals are short circuited. So it will be 6i1 plus 2i2, which is our second equation for h parameters, sorry, z parameters. So z21 will be equal to 6, z22 will be equal to 2. All right. So now we have got equations for z parameters. I'll write it separately. Let me just write them separately. v1 is equals to minus 13 I1 minus 2i2 and v2 is equals to 6 I1 plus 2i2. These are the equations for z parameters. But we need equations for h inverse parameters, inverse hybrid parameters, isn't it? So for comparison, I will write it like h. What is the format of our h inverse parameters? It is I1 is equals to h11 inverse or h inverse 11 v1 plus h12 inverse I2, comma v2 is equals to h dash 21 v1 plus h dash 22 I2. This is the format. Now we need to structure or we need to make equation like this, isn't it? So it has I1, it has v1, it has I2. We don't have v2 here, and similarly in this equation also, this is the equation of z parameters, we don't have v2, isn't it? And so if we modify this equation, we'll get this equation, isn't it? So how do we modify this? I'll transfer this 2i2 to the left side, so it will be minus 13 I1 is equals to v1 plus 2i2. Then I1 will be equal to minus 1 by 13 v1 minus 2 by 13 I2, is it? So h1 h dash 11 will be equal to minus 1 by 13 and h dash 12 will be equal to minus 2 by 13. Guys, any difficulty? I hope it is clear, right? Confusing? Clear, okay. ठीक है, clear है सबको? Now पहला जो सी see the relations, huh? These all parameters are like based on each other. h11 parameters में हमने क्या किया था, h सॉरी h पैरामीटर्स में हमने क्या किया था, h पैरामीटर्स में हमें जो पहला इक्वेशन चाहिए था ना v1 के लिए, तो उसके लिए हमने दोनों इक्वेशन को यूज किया, लेकिन जो दूसरा इक्वेशन चाहिए था हमें i2 के लिए, वो डायरेक्टली हमें मिला था। लेकिन h इनवर्स पैरामीटर्स में हमें पहला इक्वेशन डायरेक्टली मिल रहा है, like we are just modifying one equation and we are getting the first equation. Now for second equation what we have to do, we have to do some modifications. Okay, अभी हमें ये इक्वेशन चाहिए। अभी इस इक्वेशन में v1 है, v2 है एंड i2 है, हमारे पास i1 नहीं है। सो i1 नहीं है तो हमें क्या करना पड़ेगा, i1 को हमें एलिमिनेट करना पड़ेगा सिंपली। हाउ कैन वी एलिमिनेट i1, वी कैन सिंपली एलिमिनेट i1, इस इक्वेशन को 6 से मल्टीप्लाई करो, इस इक्वेशन को 13 से मल्टीप्लाई करो, दोनों को ऐड कर दो, विल गेट i1 eliminated. Okay, so let's move further with the procedure. So मैंने क्या कहा, पहले इक्वेशन को हमें 6 से मल्टीप्लाई करना है, राइट? सो 6v1 is equals to 13 6 are how much, 13 1 are 13, 13 2 are 26, 13 3 are 39, 13 4 are 52, 13 5 are 65, 13 6 are 78. All right, okay, so it will be minus 78 i1 minus 12 i2, 6 2 are 12. नाउ इस इक्वेशन को मुझे 13 से मल्टीप्लाई करना है, सो 13 v2 इज इक्वल्स टू 78 i1 प्लस 26 i2. ओके, अभी यहाँ पे सब्ट्रैक्ट नहीं करना है, यहाँ पे ऐड करना है, क्योंकि ये ऑलरेडी नेगेटिव है, सो नेगेटिव नेगेटिव कट जाएगा। सो 26 में से 12 अगर जाता है तो बचता है 14 i2 एंड वी हैव हियर इज इक्वल्स टू 6 v1 प्लस 13 v2। लेकिन हमें चाहिए किसके फॉर्म में, we need in the form of v2, right? So we'll keep v2 here as it is, 13 v2 is equals to, what is this, i2, yeah, so 6 minus 6 v1 plus 14 i2, so v2 will be equal to minus 6 by 13 v1 plus 14 by 13 i2। so यहाँ पे h21 जो है वो h21 क्या रहेगा, h21 रहेगा 6 by 13 and h inverse to 1, h inverse to 2 will be equal to 14 by 13. Okay, so this is how we calculate it. Now we'll revise this quickly and then we'll close the class for today. Transmission parameters और जो इसके थोड़े से एडवांस लेवल के एग्जांपल्स रहेंगे, और इसमें कुछ रिलेशंस भी रहते हैं लाइक रेसिप्रोसिटी थ्योरम एंड ऑल दैट, मतलब बहुत सारे रिलेशंस है इसमें। किस तरीके से हम टू पोर्ट नेटवर्क को कैस्केड कर सकते हैं, किस तरीके से हम उनको पैरेलल में रख सकते हैं, सीरीज में रख सकते हैं, so, ये सारी चीजें वी हैव टू डिस्कस, बट दैट विल डू इन द next class, transmission parameters and all other things. But first of all we will quickly revise how we write it. Okay, now z parameters को हम कैसे लिखते हैं, z parameters को हम लिखते हैं v1 is equals to z11 i1 plus z12 i2, v2 को हम लिखते हैं z21 i1 plus z22 i2, i1 को हम लिखते हैं y पैरामीटर्स में, हाउ डू वी राइट इट, y11 v1 plus y12 v2 is equals to y21 v1 plus y22 v2, इज इट। h पैरामीटर्स को हम कैसे लिखते हैं, अभी यहाँ पे हमें क्या लेना है, i1 और v2 लेना है, राइट? सो h11 i1 plus h12 v2 is equals to h21 i1 plus h22 v2। आई होप आई एम करेक्ट, राइट? नाउ यहाँ पे हमें क्या करना है, i1 है, v2 की जरूरत नहीं है, v1 चाहिए और सॉरी i2 चाहिए और v1 चाहिए, राइट? सो h इनवर्स 11 v1 प्लस h inverse 1 to I2 इज इक्वल्स टू, अभी V2 के लिए हम कैसे लिखेंगे, h इनवर्स 2 1 V1 plus h inverse 2 to I2. So this is how we write it. All right. So I hope it was clear for you. It was kind of a revision for you, I guess. You already have learned this. Okay. So guys, I think we should stop for today. You have any doubt, you can ask me, or else we can leave the class. We can close the class. Shall we close the class? Okay. Okay. Yeah, fine. No problem. Yeah, guys, then you can leave the class. No problem. Bye bye. Bye, Makka.
Usa na, usa. Oo.